and also, obviously, members of the Gala movement. I'm not sure if it's a movement or organization, but members of the Gala. It's our pleasure to have you here today, and we thank you for coming. We thank the press for attending this press conference, even though it's short notice. Now, the purpose of this press conference is very simple. The Gambia government received a petition from the Gala last month. And in this petition, they raised three critical issues. One of them is the implementation of Parliamentary Inquiry Report recommendations on the importation and sale of petroleum products valued at $30 million. The second issue raised was the general update on the progress of audited cases involving corruption and fraud. And the third case is the implementation of the acute kidney failure, or AKI, panel investigations. Now, as a government that is responsive and sensitive to the concerns and demands of citizens, we took these petitions very seriously. And we convened a high-level panel to sit and scrutinize these petitions and come up with an appropriate response to the Gala. How do we know that we are taking this very seriously? Today we have cabinet here. Today, Gala is interfacing, the public is interfacing with cabinet. Cabinet is not a space. Cabinet is a composition. And here today we have about 7 to 8 cabinet members here because we take the concerns of citizens very seriously. As already announced by the chair of the press conference, the Minister of Finance will read the government's press statement, which is the response to the Gala. Obviously, we'll hand over the written one to the Gala after the press briefing. But one thing that we want to emphasize as a government, that we are ready to engage citizens, to discuss issues that are of critical concern to everyone. We and citizens, particularly Gala, we are not at different convergence points. We are all talking about the same thing, and we are all concerned about the same things. We have a commitment to fight corruption and to ensure that public finances are judiciously managed. And I think that is what Gala wants. So let us engage rather than confront. Let us solve our problems in discussion rooms rather than in the streets, because it will be of nobody's interest. That is what we are feeling as a government. We want to engage every citizen, be it Gala, with that will focus and promote engagement rather than confrontation. That will focus on solving our problems in our offices, in meeting rooms, in conference rooms, rather than in the streets. I hope that we are closing that chapter now, and now we are moving to engagement. And I give this challenge to Gala, and the government is aware of your concerns, and government is ready to work with you to resolve these concerns. We'll open our doors for engagement, and I hope going forward engagement will be the appropriate action we take in dealing with our collective issues. On that note, I'd like to end here, and I'd like to call the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs to come and read government's press statement in response to the Gala petitions. Thank you.
Corrective action reflects the commitment of both the Ministry of Petroleum and PURA in upholding regulatory best practice. PURA is actively reviewing the enforcement regulation to bring them in line with international best practice. The authority aims to finalize and adopt revised enforcement regulations alongside updated petroleum licensing guidelines by December 2025. The Central Bank has sanctioned 2 commercial banks following the inspection prompted by the FIU intelligence report, and is conducting a special audit of foreign currency transactions and sub-accounts managed by third parties to ensure that no such arrangement exists in the banking sector for the perpetration of the illicit transaction. The GRA has issued best of judgment assessment to the 2 non-compliant petroleum companies, that is Crib Energy and Ultimate Beige Limited, in the sums of $8,576,716 and $12,200,000 296,923 respectively, and instituted a recovery process to ensure that they comply with the tax obligation. Recognizing the critical importance of a nationally accredited petroleum laboratory in safeguarding the product quality, environmental safety, and consumer protection, the government of the Gambia has entered into an agreement with SIPA for the construction and equipping of a state-of-the-art petroleum testing laboratory under the auspices of the Gambia Standards Bureau. This initiative represents a major step towards addressing petroleum quality assurance and aligns with broader national efforts to strengthen the petroleum sector infrastructure. Furthermore, the government also accepted the recommendation for further investigations and referred these to the relevant authorities for follow-up actions. This includes an independent criminal investigation should be conducted by the police into the conflict of interest and breach of fiduciary duties by the General Manager of Gambia Petroleum. PURA Gambia Competition Commission should also conduct an audit exercise as regards the fairness in allocation of ullage. With the indication, Mr. Gao submitted a report to the Minister of Youth and Sport stating that the entire interest amount had been retired. He claimed that the remaining funds were used for transit hotels, food and beverages. However, the players later informed the Minister of Youth and Sport that they did not receive any refreshments during the 6 to 7 hours transit at the airport in Morocco. When the Permanent Secretary requested an explanation and a detailed explanatory report with supporting documents from Mr. Gao, he claimed to have duly retired the funds to the AFCON subcommittee, but the committee chairman confirmed that there was an outstanding amount of 12,500 euros, equivalent to 937,500. Against this background, the PSC conducted an investigation into the matter. The conclusion of the investigation revealed that Mr. Gao has accepted and took responsibility for the missing funds amounting to the 937,500 or equivalent of 12,500 euros. In the light of his admission of guilt, the PSC demoted Mr. Gao while requiring him to refund the unretired interest of 937,500. Mr. Gao has since completed that payment, and the Commission is awaiting the confirmation of the full payment from the National Sports Council. Item 5. Investigations conducted by Gambia Immigration Department. I will use a bit long, so I'm sure you'll bear with me. The PSC conducted 2 investigations at the Gambia Immigration Department related to the allegation of corruption and fraud. The case of Bakari Njai, Superintendent of Immigration. The Public Service Commission received a preliminary investigation report from the Permanent Secretary, Personal Management Office on the 27th of January 2025 regarding an allegation that Mr. Bakari Njai, Superintendent of Immigration, collected an amount of $30,000 from one Ismail Tunkara in return granted him bail with a promise that he was going to talk to the magistrate at the Kama Magistrate Court to influence his sentence if found guilty. Mr. Tunkara was caught by the immigration officers at the Banjul International Airport and taken to court for using someone else's passport with the intention of traveling. The investigation concluded that Superintendent Bakari Njai took the monies but was compelled to return the monies to the rightful owner through the intervention of the Gambia Immigration Department senior management at the Banjul International Airport. In the light of the foregoing, PSC concluded that the action of Superintendent Bakari Njai constituted a gross misconduct, and the Commission therefore approved the termination of his services accordingly. The case of Musa D. Sanyang, Deputy Superintendent of Immigration. PSC conducted an investigation into the allegation of issuance of massively labeled passport to one Mbemba Drame. At the conclusion of the investigation, it was concluded that Deputy Superintendent Musa D. Sanyang was the person who facilitated the issuance of non-biometric passport to Mbemba Drame after jumping bail and fleeing the country. He was thus found to have failed to exercise due diligence given his capacity as the systems administrator. In view of the findings and conclusion, the PSC decided to dismiss Deputy Superintendent Musa Disanya from services of the Gambia government on the grounds of his fraudulent conduct. 6. Investigation conducted by the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources. At the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources, the Commission received a complaint about one Mr. Lamin Baja, the Regional Forestry Officer at Lower River Region. At the conclusion of the investigation, it was established that Mr. Bajo had failed to obey the instruction given and has established a school of pharmacy under the University of the Gambia and has conducted admissions for the first batch of students for 2025 academic year. The Pharmacy Council of the Gambia is regarded as a very important health regulatory body, and the Minister of Health and the government, through the current review of the Pharmacy Council Act of 2024, will ensure that it is adequately empowered and independent for its effective and efficient operations. Legislative process is initiated for the introduction of a mandatory real-time digital traceability system for all pharmaceutical outlets across both the private and public sectors. Once enacted, a track and trace system will be in place from the manufacturer throughout the supply chain to the consumer. If that comes through, I think the issue of missed drugs or inavailability of drugs in our public facilities will be significantly reduced. Justice, compensation, and the healing for victims and families. The case is currently before the courts, and the court's ruling will determine the government further action regarding justice, compensation, and the healing of victims and the families. The government is working with the Indian authorities to file a case against the Indian pharmaceutical firm that exported the killer syrup to the Gambia. Legislative reforms and institutional oversight. The Ministry of Health is reviewing the amendment bill on the medicines and related products. This process will conclude soon and will be submitted to the National Assembly for next enactment. I think it has been a long session, sort of like a marathon, but we are now concluding. Ladies and gentlemen, these reforms, both across our public finance systems and in the petroleum sector, represent a decisive step forward toward a modern, transparent, and accountable state. The government of the Gambia remains committed to implementing these measures in full and will report progress to both the National Assembly and the general public, while acknowledging the incidences and the negative impacts of corruption on our society as it undermines the development, security, and human rights and rule of law. This administration is committed to combating corruption by all means necessary. To do that, I call upon active participation of all citizens, civil society organizations, the press, the youth groups, and members of the diaspora to join hands with the government in this important endeavor. Let us work together to build the future where justice prevails, where the wounds of the past are healed, and where the potentials of these nations will be realized. I thank you for your kind attention, and thanks to my colleague ministers.
Li ñoo liggéey si gestu tuumal yooyu mooy police yi ñoo dee commencé investigation bi ñoo dee gestu mbir mi so police yi dañ ko dee gestu ñoom buñ gestoo ba pare ñu yónni file bi si small office mooy the Attorney General's Chambers and the Ministry of Justice ñun nag suñ jotee file bi yu bëree day ñëw lii suñ liggéey mooy ñu gestu evidence yi nga xam ne yooyu la police yi am si file bi li dee yàggal affaire bi benn ñaar ba different reasons yi dee tax affaire bi di yàggal either at the level of investigation or si ñun pour analyse files yi man suma side mooy benn pour gestu evidence yi ba nga am enough evidence to support alleged charges yi sometimes daf dee jël time because every evidence bu police yi def si biir file bi including su fekkee ne audit la lii yëpp danga ko war a gëstu bu baax a baax because am nañu a lot of experience bi nga xam ne dañ dee yàkkamti ñu dem si court bi ñu lose case bi either because amuñ sufficient evidence. Evidence nag dafa war a doy su ma ko wax si angale sufficiency bi dafa nekk in quantity ak quality. Suñ amul enough evidence liñ dee def mooy ne dañ dee delloo file bi baax si police bi ñu wax leen fu ñu yaakaar ne foofu la gaps yi nekk. Then ñu def further investigation. So some of these cases yi nga xam ne ñu leen a laajte su fekkee ne seet nañ trafic bi dinañ gis ne dem nañ si police yi ñëw na justice dellu na police ñëw na si ñun because anytime suñ gëstoo file bi suñ gisee gaps dañ ko dee send back to the police ñu wax leen ne there are gaps ñu delluwaat gëstu port authority file bi si na bokka ak yeneen file anytime su Ministry of Justice form opinion ne am nañ sufficient evidence pour support charges yi naturally dinañ file indictments so am na yoo xam ne ñu ngi leen a file fu mu nekk nii am na yoo xam ne ba léegi evidence yi ñu gis si file yi doyanguñ ñu so dañ ko dee delloo si police yi ñu def further investigations so loolu lañ toll waaye bu ñu amee any file boo xam ne gis nañ fa sufficient evidence pour charge benn file du finance Ministry of Justice we'll file all of them bépp boo xam ne file wuñ ko that means the legal opinion bi moo form opinion ne sufficient evidence nekk fa pour sustain charges yi da nga leen a war a understand ne lépp luñ fa nekk tuumal la te tuumal boo defee court yow mi tuumal ki nga tuumal yow yaa ko war a prove beyond reasonable doubt these are criminal charges it's not just proof but you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt so when we don't have sufficient evidence we don't go to court. There is no attempt on the side of the Ministry of Justice or the state to cover or protect anybody. Once investigations are done, we investigate, we evaluate the evidence. If we are not satisfied, we send it back for further investigations. Public Order Act is not the only piece of legislation that is colonial legislation we inherited. Our laws are still full of legislations that are old, but the usability of the legislation is not necessarily only based on the time or the duration or how old a piece of legislation is. We're still using a lot of legislations that are colonial or even post-independence. Yes, Public Order Act is one of them. It has been challenged, and we commend civil society. It has been challenged at the ECOWAS Community Court by some Gambians to declare some aspect of the Public Order Act as violation of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. ECOWAS Community Court delivered a different judgment. They disagreed and they said it is not against the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It was also challenged before our own Gambian Supreme Court and the constitutionality of the Public Order Act. And the Supreme Court again said that the Public Order Act is not unconstitutional. So the legality or the constitutionality of the Public Order Act is settled. Now, whether we want to maintain it in our laws or we want to remove it, this is an ongoing dialogue, and government is free to be engaged to this discussion. That's what I can say at this stage.
The gentleman claimed that the money were used during transit. So when he was confronted, because the players themselves said no, we were not given any such things. But he plus few other testimonies that suggest that he might have used some, but the commission did not believe it. So it was a lie as far as the commission was concerned. Now, this was an interest. So he had a plan to steal. It was a legitimate money given for specific purpose. He collected the purpose, but in the process also lied about it. Okay, the intent might happen there. But again, like I said, he did indicate that he had used some of the money. And he presented his defense at the commission, presented some facts. But the general conclusion was that this is not believable. We are going by our assertions, and that is the money was not used, as we said. Now, the reports of the recommendation of the commission was, okay, first step, return this money, and the money was restored. Alright? So, and then what is the consequence? Next step, then they recommended for demotion, and that was also done. Now, again, if in the case is still being reviewed, but at the moment that is where the case is. The primary objective of government was to recover every budget of the funds. And that was
that. I think where you are getting it wrong is you're looking at the figures. You're looking at the circumstances itself. That's the fact. Every case is unique. Every case, you look at the circumstances. And you weigh the circumstances in terms of intent, in terms, there are so many checks. It's not the amount you only take. You're just focusing on 9.730. No. That is not the way law works. And it's not the way justice works. No, what I'm saying is that you need to understand the particulars of the case itself. You don't look at the figures. Don't look at the figures. Even if you go to the criminal justice system, two people will commit the same crime. They'll free one and they'll convict one. So that's not the way justice works. Thank you.
Ministers and everyone who was present. So first, Gala will do a response after we receive the statement. Officially, that will also raise questions, but quickly for clarification. First, I will want to clarify that the Honorable Minister of Justice say the Public Order Act is constitutional, yes, but it's not allowing the personalities to be there. No, that's a great question.
You ask questions.
I just to say that the country constitution was not allowing the personalities, so the human rights, so we can best people with the constitution. My first question is, the statement you said the president are ordered for arrest and constitution of publications in the APA Act. This is 2022. How far will the arrest and prosecution? Who are the individuals, and how far is that going? We want specifics, so that clear in what we do. The minister and the director of petroleum that are involved in the petroleum side. I'm sure the investigation goes on. We should start setting penalties before investigations and otherwise dealing with the questions we always have. What is happening with the justice in cabinet and the issues in that petroleum. Second, why does the government have to wait for things spoken in court every day before they can take action and then bring that justice for the APA? Because there's a complete for the court. We know the court because justice is your police. Justice has been done before serving in the court. So let's go.
You can, where is the person who was asking the question? Yeah, so if I miss out something, you can refresh my memory. On the API, the head of the Medicine Control Agency was dismissed. I'm not sure whether the public is aware of that. You're aware. The representative of the victims' families started negotiations with government. There were exchanges and offers made. Are you with me? Yeah. So there was a dialogue that started. Offers were made for compensation. They were turned down, and then they chose to go to court. Now, the nature of the AKI incident, I wish my colleague, the health minister, was here. I'll speak in the area where the legal issues are concerned. My office contacted a law firm in the United States that has specialized in, you can say medicine, because some big law practices have different specialization. These ones have a big practice with respect to pharmaceutical law. So we were working with them, trying to see what remedies could be available to us even internationally. As we speak, the ambassador of the Gambia in India is actively working on having clearance from the government of India for a delegation from the Gambia to travel. The delegation appointed by His Excellency includes the foreign minister. It started during the time of the former foreign minister, the health minister, and myself, because I've been informed to be on standby to be on that mission. So there is a bilateral engagement that is also underway. But of course, some of these things, you need to understand, they hardly can move as fast as sometimes we want them. But locally, as a government, the task force did their work, they did their recommendations. Some aspects of the recommendations were implemented, and some aspects are still awaiting implementation. Including in their recommendations is reform of the laws. and the reform of the laws, a consultancy is currently underway that is reviewing the entire legal framework of the medical system. Not only medicine and pharmaceutical laws, but they are reviewing the whole laws of the Ministry of Health. And this process is underway. The consultancy is very advanced, I'm aware, because I'm following, because the consultant also talks to me. So a greater aspect of the recommendations done by the task force with respect to the AKI is underway. But this is government. And if you belong to civil society, you need to understand, if you are on the other side, there are things that you want to move in certain ways. In government, things don't move that way. Certain things have procedures, and they have to follow those due processes. Your second issue was with respect to now the two ministers with respect to the parliamentary resolution. You need to understand first resolutions of parliament. They are recommendations on government. They are not binding in their nature. Best practice this determines that we work with parliament and see how they are implemented. But with respect to the two ministers, parliament did not recommend to the president to remove them. They recommended censure. Censure is a parliamentary process that has to be initiated from within parliament itself and be implemented by parliament, not the executive. And censure must be based on proven evidence. So parliament needed to initiate a petition from within the parliament that will be signed by members, and that petition will be served on the president, and the president will serve the two ministers concerned. 2 weeks after the date of the censure and the petition is served, there will be a debate in parliament, and the grounds of the censure will be debated. And those ministers concerned are entitled to reply. They are entitled to respond because these are still allegations. They will reply, and parliament will take a vote. And then when the vote is carried, then the censure succeeds. If the vote is not carried, the censure fails. Remember, we all yearn for rule of law in this country. We cannot just say that somebody is accused of something, therefore we act. We have to give people the benefit of the doubt. They are entitled to respond. They are entitled to their side of the story. That's what we all cry for. And this can happen to any one of us. We can be a victim of any allegation. Are we saying once somebody is accused, the person is not entitled to defend himself or respond or reply? So the censure that is recommended in the resolution, if Parliament wants, is an independent organ of government. They can initiate the censure process against the said ministers. So for the resolution, I think most of the press statement that was read here today is in response to some of the key contents of some of those resolutions, which you said you will respond to, isn't it? So this dialogue can continue and it can go on further. There are three issues I took. What was the third issue? Of course, any law is a bit. Nobody is disputing that. But you raise human rights. We need to get things right. If we have to dialogue honestly. Right. The ECOWAS Community Court of Justice tested our public order against the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, with the African standard of our Human Rights Charter. You know about that judgment.
Yes, I know.
You read it?
Yes, I read it.
So,
however, you see, that's the thing with the court. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the thing with the court. The court may make its judgment based on certain principles and evidence. That goes to the fact that human rights, protests, or peaceful assembly is a fundamental human right. So any other law or bylaw must not be used for censoring. That's why the conversation should be passing left side. Let us see that there should be, let's amend the Public Order Act.
Alright, that's fine. Government is willing to talk about this. Anything that can be done, nothing is off the table. As long as we are talking, we can talk. How do we even amend it? What do we amend it? What do we agree to disagree? These things are before part of the dialogue. Nobody is saying it cannot be discussed. But if we have to discuss from a frank point of view. You cannot tell me something is legal that I know is not illegal. And I agree just because I want to dialogue with you. Alright, the process was going on. But people have the right to go to court anytime they feel like. Probably they think government process is slow. And that we are not embarrassed to admit to that. Government processes, even in the developed world, sometimes can be painstaking. This is a hard fact. Governments don't operate like a private company. So many things have to go through so many processes. And sometimes it's true. Not only even AKI victims, even the victims of Gambia, things to happen. but we cannot get them to happen at the pace at which we want it. And because of processes, because government have a design system, have processes, have laws, have a lot of regulations that need to be followed, and some of these things don't happen the way overnight. So processes were underway, like I said. There were even negotiations that started. I can even go to an extent to tell you there was a budget line to start compensating the victims. But they declined the offer that was made by government, and they choose to claim higher amounts in court. Once they go to court, we are now bound to go with them to court and wait and see the outcome of the court. We couldn't do much. But we continue with our other bilateral engagement, trying to engage the government of India, trying to see how we get in touch with the company that is actually the company that manufactured these drugs until they found their way into the Gambia. So government is relentless. No government will lose kids, babies, and be complicit in the way you address that issue. Really. But like I tell you, this is the situation. We were doing what we can, but in the meantime, we were served with a suit from the court. What do we have? We have no choice but to go to court and start defending the suit that we were served. But there was a budget already allocated for compensation. But what we offered, they didn't accept it. They didn't even accept the part payment. So what else can you do?
How much was it?
That was talking to their lawyers. They've instructed me to negotiate. If I agree with them, Ministry of Health had a budget they are willing to pay. But in our negotiation with their lawyers, the gap was so high, so we couldn't agree. The next minute we were served.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is the clarification we are trying to make. A resolution from the National Assembly to an executive, these are different organs of government. It's still a recommendation. And that recommendation needs to be investigated because these people have a contract. So you need to do further investigation and check and decide what is the best course of action. We need to understand, you see, if we are going to be in civil society and we want to be advocates, we need to understand the relationship between organs of state. National Assembly does not necessarily dictate to the executive. When they pass a resolution and ask government to do something, it equivalent in law is a recommendation. Now, government need to look into that investigation and look at the evidence that National Assembly relies on to recommend that somebody should be sacked or somebody should be punished. So those investigations, I don't know, but those investigations were going on as far as I am aware. But from a legal point of view, I just want to clarify that it's not every recommendation from the National Assembly to the executive can be acted upon without further check. Because the recommendation is not law. This is one organ of state sending the recommendation to another organ of state. It's not a court judgment.
Against the general manager, Gambia Petroleum, Mr. Gala, was that he was unfairly allocating storage space. We call it ullage. Right? Now, to another extent of unfair treatment in the allocation of ullage, then that was the basis for the recommendation. Now, but the investigation and the substantive evidence that supports it was also quite weak because the statement have clearly addressed that to say at the time of allegation of unfair treatment, actually there was ample space on in the depot. To about half of the space of the depot was occupied. Now, if that is the case, why also not make similar recommendation to the other private storage facility, where some of these also found its way anyway? So you said that you were this was unfair allocation of space, but these people were I mean at the time literally all they were putting space. They weren't going there, and that even when this gentleman was the one who initiated and made a claimant to attract even half of the space that they occupied through his time. So he was desperately looking for people to come and utilize the space. But like I said, it's a recommendation, and like as the general has said, not all recommendations are binding. But they still have responsibility to look into it and on the benefit of the merit, then address it.
Let me clarify one thing. If you just 1 second, if you look at the schedule of the National Assembly for this September session, which has been published, some of those recommendations they have listed the ministers concerned to come and respond. Because in their own standing orders, when they make such resolutions, whoever has been advancedly mentioned in those resolutions, you are entitled to respond. All right? So if you look at the September session, in their schedules, ministers have been listed to come and respond to some of those resolutions that were made. That shows that even after the resolution, National Assembly itself knows that there is room that the party that has been advancedly mentioned could make a reply, and based on that reply, in fact, their position could change. So you don't expect that once a resolution is passed, it will be implemented. Some of these resolutions need further investigation, whether the allegations are substantiated or not.
Question.
No, I'm asking, is it a legislative committee review?
Well, you should help me.
So my question, before you ask, let's clarify this one. If it's online, you can call it online radio.
Currently online radio. So my question will go to the Minister of Justice. Even I will, pick from the Minister of Finance. The government is committed to having dialogue, with young people before they resort to the streets, which is commendable. So I want to ask the Justice Minister, because currently we have about 38 young people. 23 are being granted bail from the court, and the other 15 from under the police. Is the government ready to drop all these charges leveled against these young people, to have a dialogue with them in order to complement the efforts of the government?
The question is asked by the Chief of Staff, Honorable Chief of Staff. We just need to talk to each other as brothers, not temper.
Corruption is not absolutely measured. Perception like matter. Perception is the perception that is done by an organization called Transparency International. So ñoom seen Sapayño Hall to identify the corruption at the local context of the put. So you say you better after corruption is rampant. It's because government is actively disclosing this information. Most of these corruption cases are not immediate; they are past events. So I think that is, and having such a discourse, women and the government is ready, and there is no corrupt-free country that I know of. It's just the magnitude and the degree. And this level of dialogue is important. So, Transparency International, Lola Adinapi Ranye, see measurement of corruption, perception that they would take at international. So, you cannot marry the two. They are like apple and oranges. All right? I hope I answered. Thank you.
As one says that
Compliance with their judgments.
is that compliance to ECOWAS court?
That's what I'm saying. ECOWAS community court judgments.
We're talking about our courts.
That's what I'm telling you.
So we're talking about our court, not ECOWAS court, because we don't have a court with the ECOWAS court. It's either you pay your fees and the government for it. We are saying our local court judgment.
Okay.
Our local court judgment. Are we respecting the government and the fight and pay? Because Pablo is an example. I look more examples. Because we are talking about the ECOWAS court. Let's normalize this conversation now.
So, with Bamoru's case, what I'm saying, you are right, there's a distinction between domestic court judgments and ECOWAS court judgment. But you are wrong in saying that we don't have an option with ECOWAS court. In fact, enforcement of the ECOWAS court judgment on a sovereign country is even more difficult. Because if you don't pay, there's nothing they can do. You have enforcing the judgment against a sovereign state is even more difficult than the domestic ones. So it's not that we are compliant with payment of ECOWAS court judgment because we don't have an option. No, it's the character of this government I'm trying to show that we are willing and ready to comply with valid court judgments, domestically or internationally. And we've already made a record at the international stage, and we are doing our best to comply with almost all the domestic court judgments. We did all this dialogue. In our preparation of this statement that was delivered by the Honorable Minister for Finance, we looked at every single allegation contained in that resolution. Well, like I told you, we go through them, look at the evidence that the National Assembly had access to, and their conclusions vis-a-vis what is the other evidence that they might not even have seen. So yes, government is looking into it. Sure, we don't just say it's a recommendation, so we put it aside. No. Naturally, this government, President Donald have made a statement that there's not going to be any he's not going to be anybody's godfather with respect to these issues.
wala ñinin karo kumata bate ina rongo na ñan gote because na me jube masakunda malati drong pour ala banku diol sibla katako go hada badi wo hada madi mantima so wala nan ferol landi falendiro ke masakunda la nafulo tamande ñato non do ni tata immigration passport ikakolo jo kasiala visa wata ke mirare cardio bank mirare lands e cardio bank mirare RBTH nuto kasiala be ikakolo kala sign bank lebe so lafta be kala wala mindi ko follow ni la fakke ila banko di mol tanka iki tanka katala follow wala mindi la do ko bunda fali nyala me alonko mol bulo ke tugla ko do so masa kunda tamad nya fali tawol bi ni dara giare isi la clearance beke imismo lo ports imismo lo giare ini custom officer manyoji na pare ka system mo access ya ka bank yajo wulbele be je pour ka mol makoy kam sakunda makoy ka tamad nya fali masanu ko nala nafulo womo kiliti fulanja nundo ni ko kede kapi sign buka so wala akela wato men nam bota kala man simo kiye internal audit ministry beto auditor general fanala do ba tamandika anu nundo audit report ol kanale yetara pay ku boka kede bar sign min kake audit report do fumule do mesilo momoron di ni e to safeje no le to safejante ko masakunda kasi fal bentaji ku jamal funde da jamanke ko molle ya fonde mutol famol la do ko nya wala fale wala no ko na rafunti anu sai na mumuta an ko president ya ko nyame mote ke ni sa ko abe tankande ni le do ibeta mala kite na klon la loi même fo o loi ta so wala tinna ngana hani public finance management ba falita be loi ko samba kanna pour ka jeko masakunda la tamandirinya na kulo la tamandirinya be fali isaje ko ni da kwa go na je kwa kuna corruption mansia ni da kwa ni ma mol ka menke pour ka kodo tambe ni nyobla gasia mfana la to si fa la dulle la so we dan ba te ken ani fana odi be ken fual be fali kan ne ani mi a digitalization. You understand it. So, Abolanya. I hope. Yes. In English? Okay. Yes. What I'm trying to say, this is a very good question. Our objective to fight corruption is by building institutions and reforming processes and procedures of managing public finances. We have to protect our citizens. Because every human being is fragile, is amenable to make mistakes. Some of these cases, with hindsight, they could have been avoided. It was because of the way the systems were designed. Now we have gone on to reform the entire government financial management system. In fact, I can safely say in the next few, if it is not already happening, a directive has been issued to eliminate all cashier positions. No longer will any public revenue transaction be handled by a cashier. Even if it is happening, know that it has not yet got there. But we want to ensure that every payment is online, if you get there, or you pay to a bank, so as to prevent citizens from having the temptation. Because it's sometimes, let me give a simple example. You are collecting millions, and your salary is less than 5,000. And you have financial problems. It's very human that every day you take $10, I'll fix it tomorrow, thinking that you can make it up. By the time you realize it, it has ballooned to a large amount. That's why we are changing our public financial management systems to ensure that people do not have access to public resources. Our procurement laws have been revised to ensure that procurement is further enhanced. And we did not just do this in isolation. We took a holistic review of public financial management system and vulnerabilities This includes changing the procedures, changing the legal framework. That's why the public financial management is being changed. And we are very pleased, even if you look at the performance of the revenue collection, all is a reflection of the changes that are being put in place. And I can tell you, some of these changes are not easy to institute. The credit goes to the president himself, because in instituting some of these changes, they are so difficult that the people who are there right now would put up every resistance for it not to take place. But the president is unwavering. He said he has zero tolerance to corruption, and that's why he has instructed us to proactively deter and prevent corruption. The internal audit is working actively, the Auditor General reports, and all these things, like for example, we can pull out some of the cases. Some of them have been discovered at our own instigation. It's not a PS, it's the whole mechanism of review and processes that we've put in place. It's a work in progress, but we're slowly getting there. And I think it is incumbent on any citizen. If you see something wrong, report it, say it, and action will be taken.
One final question.
Not disputing that somebody might have told you. I'm not disputing what somebody might have told you in the prison. But I'm disagreeing that there is anybody in that prison that is there for years without going to magistrate court or court. And I've given you the reasons. We have regular prison visits. And then we make sure that the remanded prisoners, their cases may be slow, but for a year, 2 or 3 without appearing before the court, we would definitely be more than happy to receive, if you remember the names of those prisoners. No, it's okay. We can take the dialogue further. Because that is a serious thing. We will take note of that and we will address those ones immediately. But that will be very surprising to me that somebody will be in prison for even a year without appearing before court if you are a remanded prisoner. Right? So we can deal with that. If you are able to remember any one of these things. Oh yes, we will deal with those ones. Because we have a regular prison visits. Even the Director of Public Prosecution, the Gambia Bar Association, regularly visits the prisons to take note of those cases and make sure we partner with the judiciary. Not long ago, even the judiciary organized a prison visit with the bar and my office to go and look at those cases and make sure how do we expedite their cases. It's absolutely wrong. It cannot be excused. So we will be very interested to know about those ones so that we can deal with them quickly. The prisons conditions bar, we don't even argue that. Terrible, whatever you give it, especially for you. Okay. But this was a strong recommendation of the TRRC as well. Prisons reform, and it's accepted by government. I don't know whether you watched the Ministry of the Interior's turn at the Mansakunda. Was it last week or week before? They have extensively dealt with this issue. The responses are in YouTube. Already we have a plan for a brand new prison. Part of the funds have already been secured. Work which plan has been secured, and work will commence very soon. So it's a priority. Like I said, it has always remained a priority. But again, the same processes. But as we speak at the moment, the site is secure. Plan has been brought to cabinet, which has been endorsed, and I think more than half of the funds required to start the work have also been secured. So work will start soon, so that my 2 prisons will completely be closed down.
Clarity. Gulf Petroleum, by law, is a private limited liability company. Recommendations from the government have to go through their governance structure. That means through their board. And that's what the report is actually insinuating. If he was a direct employee of the government could have taken direct action. But that is a point of clarification. And I think we will be transparent with you in this regard. Gulf Petroleum being a limited liability company, of course, majority shareholders are owned by parastatals, which are government, but by form is a limited liability and it has its own board. So in such cases, even when the earlier crisis happened, all the work that was done through the board. You cannot ask government go ahead and impose on a limited liability company your own course of action to take. So the recommendations have been communicated duly to the governance structure, and the timetable is for them to decide when they'll commence and how they'll proceed with that. Thank you.
False protesters released unconditionally and these ones released on bail. I'm not too sure whether they're the same offense. The file hasn't reached me yet. It's still a law enforcement stage. I just will try to probably post pass an answer. I'm not specific to the previous. Remember, this case at this stage is still at the interior level. It's law enforcement. It hasn't reached my office yet. But it's normal. That's this law enforcement discretion. You can release somebody on self-recognition. You can release somebody on other bail conditions. So it's perfectly okay. I don't know what informed the difference. I wouldn't know at this stage until the file reaches my office. But I can say it's not out of normal. It's not out of the ordinary. It's entirely the discretion of law enforcement.
The importance that we attach to these issues, that is why all these ministers came. And I thank them for coming and also for taking their time to respond to some of your questions. I also like to thank the Gala for coming and also for accepting our invitation to come, and also for being civil and also polite, and also for cooperating and asking questions in a manner that we expect in a democratic setting. Also to thank all government officials and members of the press, of course, because it's a press conference. We hope, or we wish we had more time to discuss. I've seen that people are still having questions. This is the importance of dialogue. We'll organize, I think Mr. of you discussed that yesterday, working on something to have a town hall. This is the way we can solve our problems. I don't think it's about us, we and them. Like it's about us. We have a journey, a common journey. On this journey, our destinies are tied as people, as citizens. And I think if we don't dialogue, we will never understand each other. Perhaps me and Lamin C is my brother. He might be on the other side, venting, me venting. But if we sit and dialogue, we don't understand that we're all on the same page. So let us have that spirit. That should be the spirit going forward, like I said. I know the Public Order Act is a contentious issue. But like I said, the dialogue continues. Every country goes through a reform process. The desire you have to repeat it is the desire that citizens have to maintain it. There are citizens who think that we should maintain it because they believe that it will protect lives and property. No country in the world, no democracy in fact, even the UK, before you go out to protest, you have to notify the police so they can give the required security. It is legal. And if you don't do it, it's a criminal offense in the UK. You need to notify the Metropolitan Police if you want to go out and protest in London. So the Public Order Act is not here to censor or to infringe on people's right to come out and demonstrate. Demonstration is part of political participation. We want people to come out and exercise that right. But in the exercise of that right, the police has to know about it so they can protect you. The right you have to come out to protest. If the right somebody else has a right to come and counter protest. Now if the police is not aware, and two groups meet and protest, and there is destruction of life and property, who's going to take the blame? The police, because they are responsible for the protection of life and property. So the Public Order Act is a law for now. Let the dialogue continue to see what we can do, either to repeal it or to amend it, so that nobody loses, so that citizens' rights are respected, but public order is maintained. We have to find that balance. So the dialogue will continue, like I said, as a government, we are committed to listening to the concerns and voices of young people. In fact, every citizen. We've now extended the olive branch that before we take to the streets to demonstrate in anger, engage first. Where we did not listen to your engagements and your concerns, or we express nonchalance, then you could say we've exhausted all possible peaceful means of engaging with government, now we are going to the streets. Then you have a justification for it. But every small thing, within 24 hours, we are going to the streets. It is not going to solve anybody's problem. So now going forward, we have opened the gates for engagement. And we are ready to engage with all young people in this country. If you have a concern, let us engage and discuss about it. On that note, I thank you all. This is very fruitful. We'll be having these engagements once in a while so that the public will understand, public have concern. And I think we all want the same thing, like I said. We're not enemies. We're not on the different divide. We all want the same thing for the country. All we want, all of us here, is a developed, transformative Gambia. And I think all of us should work together to make that happen. On that note, I thank you all. And Monsakunda is tomorrow. Today, tonight, we have Minister of Basic Education coming to discuss the education sector. Anybody who is available, we are invited again. Thank you.